of the rules. It requires a two-thirds majority, and it failed, and 38 Republicans voted against it. So we'll have to see what has been done differently to fashion a proposal that Speaker Johnson believes has enough votes, Jose.
And right, I mean, those 38 Republican no's were critical and key in knocking that one down. But it seems as though, and when you listen to Speaker Johnson, some of the other sources inside Capitol Hill are telling me that there's some belief within the Republican group that maybe they could do something that would avert the shutdown. But, Ryan, there's the issue of the Democrats. As you said, there is no possibility without some Democratic votes that this could, in fact, be averted.
Yeah, I mean, there's a scenario, Jose, where the bill could pass the House with only Republican votes. That could happen. That would be very difficult, but that could happen. The problem is once that bill leaves the House, it's got to pass the Senate. And even though Republicans won the election, Democrats are still in control on the Senate. And listen to what Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer said this morning, forecasting the Democratic position as to where they stand in these negotiations.
If Republicans do not work with Democrats in a bipartisan way very soon, the government will shut down at midnight. It's time to go back to the original agreement we had just a few days ago. It's time the House votes on our bipartisan CR. If the House put our original agreement on the floor today, it would pass, and we could put the threat of a shutdown behind us.
So that demonstrates the chasm that exists right now between Republicans and Democrats, Jose. You have Democrats suggesting they go back to the original deal that was hatched. That's a non-starter, of course, with Republicans and President-elect Donald Trump and, of course, Elon Musk, who is now part of these negotiations. So it is unclear what the path forward is here. But to be abundantly clear to our viewers at home, the Republicans can't do this without Democrats. Democrats cannot do this without Republicans. If the government avoids a shutdown today, it is because the two sides came together and came up with a solution that both of them can agree upon.
Ryan Nobles, let's see if that's possible. I appreciate it, my friend. Thank you. So, Garrett, what is the president-elect saying about this today? And Ryan was just talking about that there is a Trump circle that has been also very vocal about it.
Yeah, that's right, Jose. The president-elect essentially is continuing to dig a deeper hole right now, doubling down on what he told me yesterday and what he's been saying to members of his party. He posted twice on Truth Social overnight and this morning, once saying that if there is going to be a shutdown, let it begin under the Biden administration. He was telling me that about 24 hours ago. He thinks this will not politically damage him, the incoming president, who, by the way, of course, won't face voters again. He sees this as kind of a low-risk situation for him politically. He's also continuing to press his argument that the debt ceiling should be either extended, lifted, or done away with entirely. In that bill that failed last night, there was a 2-year suspension of the debt ceiling. He floated this morning on Truth Social that perhaps it should be suspended all the way to 2029 after his term would end. And, of course, he told me yesterday his preference is that it be gotten rid of entirely. He thinks it's a psychological tool that basically doesn't work. All of these demands sort of don't really fit together, as Ryan was just outlining, and Democrats are not keen to support either of these debt ceiling proposals that he's made. That's going to continue to be a problem.
Yeah, I mean, Jackie, this whole the elimination of the debt ceiling or a 2-year moratorium on it just came up really in the last seconds after that 1,500-plus page bill failed. Why the Trump focus on this now?
Yeah, Jose, there are a lot of competing demands here. I can't underscore what Garrett and Ryan said enough about that. And essentially, this debt ceiling has exposed this fissure between sort of ideological purists on Capitol Hill, fiscal hawks, and MAGA adherents who will support Trump no matter what. You have a large portion of the House Freedom Caucus and again, people on the far right who are big supporters of DOGE and the effort to cut federal spending, but who at the end of the day want to be consistent about it and don't want to support extending, abolishing, as Trump told Gary yesterday, the debt ceiling, because in order to do that, they feel like there needs to be real structural reforms that ultimately cut down on spending. Otherwise, they have said that they feel like they are cutting a blank check for the federal government, whether it's done now under President Biden or done next year. They believe that there needs to be real real fundamental changes and cuts made here. But Trump, according to the reporting that we had yesterday, had expressed this to Mike Johnson weeks ago, that he wanted to get this done to essentially clear the decks for him to get other priorities settled and prioritized come the new year. Johnson at the time, however, told Trump that they just didn't have the votes for that and that it was sort of a settled matter. Obviously, based on what happened yesterday, that issue has not been settled.
You know, and Jackie, I'm just wondering, you know, the Trump-Johnson relationship, how is that doing? And also, if there is no Johnson, then at least functionally, there is no way the government, from the House perspective, can function.
Yeah, I mean, this is a really interesting test of Donald Trump's influence in the House Republican conference, because you don't just have, Mike Johnson here not being able to necessarily relay what the conversations are at Mar-a-Lago, but you also have this group of nearly 40 House Republicans who are some of Trump's biggest supporters, who have voted against the bill yesterday that Trump wanted to have seen passed. So there is this feeling that they can't just quite throw Mike Johnson under the bus just yet, because, one, there are very few people who want this job, and two, out of a lot of these people, he is one who's in a unique position to try to be this go-between a lot of these competing demands in Florida and what his conference wants.
And Garrett, I'm just wondering, those 38 people, the Republicans that voted against this CR, this last version or latest version of the CR, are, as Jackie was saying, for the most part, strong Trump supporters. Is there any cost to them for voting against a CR that the president-elect has been championing?
Well, potentially. The president-elect has suggested that the people who vote against this bill will have primary challenges, but that's a long way off. I mean, remember, we're in the lame duck after the last election just happened. Some of those people on that list aren't coming back to Congress. Most of them are. Some of them have been threatened with primary challenges before. I mean, you have somebody like Chip Roy, who's one of the last sort of old-school Tea Party Republicans, who is voting, he believes, on a principled stand here against more spending. I think he would welcome that argument from the right. And so we'll see if any of that develops. But, Jose, buckle up, because we are getting back into those Trump news cycles in which 50 things happen in a day. It is very difficult for me to imagine this vote being the determinative thing in a primary a year and a half from now.
Yeah, and Garrett, meanwhile, on Capitol Hill, Speaker Johnson and Vice President-elect Vance met with Trump's pick to lead the OMB, Russell Vogt. What's his role in Trump world?
Yeah, look, this is somebody who's been around in Trump world, is trusted by the president-elect on issues of the economy, on tariffs. That's been, the kind of thing that he's dealt with before. But at OMB, he's the person who would potentially have his hands on the switches, if you will, of a government shutdown if there is still one going on next year. Now, obviously, he hasn't been confirmed yet, but this is somebody who would understand a lot of the process behind the scenes about just how the federal government functions, what's necessary, what's not. If he's involved in the conversations, that tells me that Trump world is at least considering the possibility that there will be a shutdown, and it could potentially be a lengthy one.
And Jackie, you wrote about Elon Musk's involvement in all of this. How do you see Musk and the DOJ committee changing how Washington functions or doesn't function?
Yeah, at the end of the day, I do see Musk as sort of Trump's right-hand man and an amplifier of a lot of the talking points and the conversations that are happening down at Mar-a-Lago. He's someone who has hardly left the president's side. They see each other sort of in the same vein with very aligned priorities. And Musk has been extremely helpful in communicating Trump's point of view. There were obviously a number of tweets, nearly 150 tweets, starting on early Thursday morning throughout the day that ultimately pushed, I think, issues that were already brewing below the surface amongst House Republicans who were unhappy with the bill that was crafted. But Musk was able to sort of successfully foment and get that bill to be sort of stopped in its tracks. But we heard from, sources around Trump and the Trump camp yesterday who were adamant that at the end of the day, this is Trump's decision driving the conversation, and that Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, who are helping lead some of the efforts to cut federal funding that House Republicans are very excited about writ large, that they are going along with what they're hearing from the president. Although, there are lots of Democrats and democracy experts, quite frankly, who are concerned that he has an outsized power and influence over some of the decision making happening on Capitol Hill. That being said, a lot of the changes that Musk and Ramaswamy were asking for on Twitter, some of the cuts to the spending package haven't ultimately materialized. Yes, there's less pages, as lots of people have been tweeting, but the actual size of the package and the amount of money being potentially appropriated is roughly the same. There are some, marginal discrepancies, such as funding for pediatric cancer that's been cut from the bill, but not some of the massive changes that Musk has been pushing for.
And Garrett, how much power and influence, to use Jackie's term, does the president-elect currently exercise in the House Republican?
Well, I think we're finding out in real time. I think he and Musk clearly had enough influence to tank this bipartisan deal, but whether he has the ability to push his own preferred policies over the finish line is another question. Jose, I go back to the first Trump administration, where I think this was largely true then as well. Donald Trump is much more effective at killing the policies that he does not like than in passing the ones that he does. He needs a strong speaker, and he needs a bigger majority. He's not going to have either of those things potentially going into next year, and I think that's going to hamper him significantly on his legislative agenda.
Garrett Hake and Jackie Alemany, thank you so very much. Really appreciate it. Coming up, House Democrats just finished up a meeting on Capitol Hill. We'll talk with one of the lawmakers who was in the room. Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz, it's a pleasure to see you. We'll chat in just a minute. Plus, how a government shutdown could immediately affect everyday Americans. And the suspect in the murder of United Healthcare CEO is facing new charges today, now that he's back in New York City. We're back in 90 seconds. You're watching Jose Díaz-Balart Reports on MSNBC.
When you need brutal honesty, when you need answers first thing in the morning, when you need to go deep inside Washington and hear from someone who's been there, you need your Morning Joe, weekdays at 6, only on MSNBC.
If you have heart disease and struggle with LDL-C,
even with statins and diet,
listen to your heart.
Talk to your doctor about Repatha.
Repatha plus a statin lowers LDL-C by 63%. Do not take Repatha if you're allergic to it. Serious allergic reactions can occur. Get medical help right away if you have trouble breathing or swallowing, swelling of the face, lips, tongue, throat, or arms. Common side effects include runny nose, sore throat, common cold symptoms, flu or flu-like symptoms, back pain, high blood sugar, and redness, pain, or bruising at the injection site. Ask about Repatha.
At U-Haul, we know every family
Come on, guys.
moves at their own pace.
Is that heavy?
That's why we have U-Box.
Take that to the kitchen for me, okay?
We can store it
Excited about the new house?
or ship it,
Who's gonna get the biggest room?
how and when you
I
want
bet
it.
you are. That's awesome.
Reserve today at uhaul.com.
Go beyond the headlines with the MSNBC app. Read, listen, and watch live breaking news and analysis anytime, anywhere. Go beyond the what to understand the why. Download the MSNBC app now.
Sixteen past the hour, back with our breaking news out of Washington, D.C. This morning, House Democrats met on Capitol Hill to discuss how to avoid a potential government shutdown that's just over 12 hours away. Now, last hour, Democratic House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries addressed the possibility of a shutdown.